All right, let's take into care of another example from our assignment of conic sections that are going to get rotated. So here's number 10 from your assignment. The equation is 13x squared plus 6 square roots of 3xy plus 7y squared minus 16. All right, again, we start by finding the angle of rotation. Our formula again is the cotangent of 2 theta equals a minus c divided by b. A, C, and B. All right, so when we simplify, 13 minus 7 is 6. The 6's would cancel top and bottom. And then you might not recognize this right off the bat. So if you get rid of the radical in the denominator, multiplying top and bottom by the square root of 3, you'd have the square root of 3 over 3. Now on your trig sheet, you can find the angle whose cotangent is the square root of 3 over 3, and that would be 60 degrees. Then dividing both sides by 2 gets us an angle of rotation of 30 degrees. All right? And then the second thing we need to do is do the change of variable. So everywhere we see an x in the original equation, we're going to replace that with x prime, x prime cosine of our angle, minus y prime sine of the angle, and wherever we see a y, we replace that with x prime sine of the angle plus y prime cosine of the angle. And then to simplify each of these, we just go to our trig sheet, replace sine of 30 degrees with 1/2, the cosine of 30 degrees with the square root of 3 over 2. So let's see, so x would then be simplified, wherever we see an x, I should say. Well, we're going to replace that with the square root of 3 over 2 x prime minus 1/2 y prime. And wherever we see a y, we'll replace that with 1/2 x prime plus the square root of 3 over 2 y prime. Right, so here we have our angle of rotation, and we have our changes of variable. So I just have to move the screen up a bit. And again, drop down our original equation. Everywhere we see an x, we're going to replace that with the square root of 3 over 2 x prime minus 1/2 y primed. So there's another x. And then everywhere we see a y, we're going to replace that with 1/2 x prime plus the square root of 3 over 2 y prime. Okay, so there, oops, I forgot the 7. So there's another y. And then at the very end, I have a minus 16 is equal to a 0. Okie doke. Alrighty, now the worst part of these again, all the simplifying. So I've got 3 FOILs to do and 3 distributive properties to do. So I'm going to do the FOILs first, the distributive properties second. All right, the first one, the binomial squared, first term squared. So that's going to be 3/4 x prime squared. The first term times the second term times 2. So that's going to be, let's see, that would be negative square root of 3 over 4. X prime y prime, and then the second term squared, negative 1/2 times negative 1/2 is positive 1/4 y prime squared. So there's my first FOIL. My second FOIL, multiplying the 2 binomials together. So the first square root of 3 over 2 x prime times 1/2. X prime is going to be the square root of 3 over 4 x prime squared. The outside, square root of 3 over 2 times square root of 3 over 2 would be 3/4 x prime y prime. The inside, negative 1/2 times positive 1/2 would be negative 1/4 x prime y prime. And then the last, negative 1/2 times the square root of 3 over 2 would be negative square root of 3 over 4. Negative square root of 3 over 4 y primed squared. Right? The third FOIL is the binomial squared, so the first term squared, 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4 x prime squared. The first term times the second term times 2 So let's see. I just realized I made a mistake earlier that we'll have to fix. The first term times the second term times 2, so that'd be 1/2 times the square root of 3 over 2 times 2 would be the square root of 3 over 2. X prime y primed. Then the second term squared, so that would be 3/4 y primed squared minus 16 is equal to 0. And as I was doing the FOIL, the third FOIL, after the 7, the binomial squared after the 7, I realized that I made a small mistake right here on that first FOIL. When I did the O and the I part of FOIL, it would be the first term times the second term times 2. I forgot to multiply it by 2. So I've got a deluxe eraser this 4 and make that a 2. Everybody see that okay? Let me point at this. So this denominator right here was supposed to have been a 2 instead of a 4. Sorry about that. Okay. Now we can get back to doing our problem. So now we've got 3 distributive properties. We've got a 13 that we need to distribute. So 13 times 3/4 x prime squared. 13 times negative square root of 3 over 2 would be negative 13 square root of 3 over 2 x prime y prime. And then 13 times 1/4 is 13/4 y prime squared. Then I've got to distribute 6 square roots of 3 inside. So 6 square roots of 3 times the square root of 3 over 4. Well, the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is 3, so 6 times 3 is 18. And 18 divided by 4 would be 9/2. Then 6 square roots of 3 times 3/4. I could cancel a 2 top and bottom. So let's see if I canceled a 2 top and bottom. That would leave me with a 2 down in the bottom. And then 3 times 3 is 9. Square roots of 3, x prime y prime. Right, the next one, 6 square roots of 3 times negative 1/4. Let's see, again, a 2 could cancel top and bottom. That would leave me with a 3, so that would be negative 3 square roots of 3, x prime y prime. Let's see, and then the fourth one, 6 square roots of 3 times the square root of 3 over 4. Again, square root of 3 times square root of 3 is 3, so 6 times 3 is 18. And 18 over 4 reduces to 9/2. Okay, and then the last distributive property, distribute the 7 inside. So 7 times 1/4. 7 times the square root of 3 over 2. And 7 times 3/4. All right, so there's all the distributive properties. We'll find out in a minute if I did those okay. I hope I did. Now what we need to do is put all of our terms together. So we need to put our x prime squareds together, our y prime squareds together. We need to hope that our x prime y primes will cancel out, and then we'll be able to see what kind of conic section we have. All right, so all the x prime squareds. So 1, 2, where's the third one? Third one, there we go. So 39/4 plus 9/2 plus 7/4. Let's see, 9/2 is the same as 18/4. So that'd be 49, 57. So 64/4. So 64/4 reduces to 16. Then let's put all of the y prime squareds together. So here's 1, here's 2, and here's 3. So 13/4 minus 9/2 plus 21/4. So let's see, if I put the 13/4 and the 21/4 together first, that would be 34/4, but 34/4 reduces to 17/2. Then 17/2 minus 9/2 would be 8/2, and 8/2 reduces to 4. Okay, now I've got to make sure that all of my x prime, y primes cancel. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4 of those fellas. And I'm just going to, for everyone who's following, I'm going to temporarily do that work over to the side here. All right, so I'm just going to put those fellas together. So negative 13 square root of 3 over 2 x prime. In fact, I'm not going to use the x prime, y primes. I'm just going to put all the numbers in front together. So negative 13 square root of 3 over 2 plus 9 square root of 3 over 2 minus 3 square root of 3 over 2. Oh, and there's the last one, plus 7 square root of 3 over 2. So they all have a square root of 3, and they all have a 2 in the denominator, so we can combine all the numbers in front. So negative 13 plus 9 minus 3 plus 7. So let's see how we do. Negative 13 plus 9 is negative 4. Negative 4 minus 3 is negative 7. And negative 7 plus 7 is 0. So indeed, all of those x prime, y prime terms do cancel out. All right, so all I'm left with then is a minus 16 is equal to 0. And so after all of that work, you can tell what type of shape this is then going to be now that the x prime, y prime terms are gone. All right, we have 2 squared terms, so we don't have a parabola. Okay, we have both of the squared terms, and they're both positive. The 16 is positive, and the 4 is positive, right? And when we have 2 squared terms that have the same sign, in this case they're both positive, that means what we're going to have in this case is an ellipse. So to get it in standard form, we need to move the 16 to the other side by addition. And then to get a 1 on the right-hand side, we have to divide by 16. So 16 divided by 16 on the right-hand side is 1. The 4 and the 16 cancel, leaving you with 4 in the bottom. And then the 16s cancel, top and bottom, leaving you with a 1. And I'm just going to remind myself of one thing. I think I remember it, but I'm just going to make sure. I'm just backing up to check the angle of rotation. The angle of rotation again was 30 degrees. So at the very end here, I'm going to try drawing my picture. We'll start with our regular x, y coordinate system. Now our angle of rotation is 30 degrees. So what we're going to do is rotate the x-axis 30 degrees and the y-axis 30 degrees. And when we make those rotations, this then becomes the x-primed axis, this becomes the y-primed axis, after we've rotated both of them 30 degrees. All right, and now to draw a decent picture, the value under the x's is a 1, so when you take the square root of 1, we get 1. So that means I need to go in each direction 1, both in the positive and negative direction on the x-primed axis. I'm going to try that again. I think my negative 1 is in a lousy spot. I'm going to try that again, make it a little more accurate. That's a little better. That's a little better. Okay? And then the value under the y primes is a 4, so when we take the square root of 4, we get 2. So that means I've got to go up 2 and down 2 on the y primed axis. So I end up with 4 points, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then since we have an ellipse, all I want you to do is do your best to sketch a ellipse through those 4 points. And what we're really trying to look at is an ellipse that's been rotated 30 degrees from the original XY coordinate system. Okay? Alrighty. So I hope this helped out anybody who was trying number 10 on their own. Alright, so good luck, and there'll be more to come.